Welcome to IDT Talks. I'm Anastasia Lavrina. Today we have a special guest in our studio, Hamdi Rifai, political analyst who arrived to Azerbaijan from Washington. Hello and welcome to our program.
Good afternoon. Thank you for having me.
Thank you. It's a real pleasure to talk with you, to touch very important issues. And in our today's conversation, I'm planning to talk with you about the political system of the United States, how it works, and how it affects the bilateral cooperation with Azerbaijan. So I was lucky enough to attend your lecture, which was held here in our university. And I liked your sentence when you say that there are 50 governments in the United States because of 50 states of the United States. And there is one single government which is beyond on the top of that. So could you tell us a bit more on that and how does it affect the cooperation between the United States and different countries?
Sure, that's a really great question because America is unlike other countries in the sense that we have a federal government which oversees national security and foreign policy and should have exclusive purview over that foreign policy. But each of the states maintains its own army and national guard, their own guards as well. And they also have their own economies and governments. So they have a governor, they have the equivalent of a parliament, a legislature in each state, and all of those people are elected, and they have their own interests. And sometimes they pursue policies that appear like the U.S.'s federal policies with regard to foreign policies, etc. So a state like California may be very unfriendly to Azerbaijan because it's dominated by a local population in California of diaspora Armenians, ethnic Armenians, whereas a state like Oklahoma, they have a very friendly relationship with Azerbaijan because they have friendly relationships. And as we all know, all politics is personal, and the ambassador has gone a long way to build good relationships with many of those states, like Oklahoma, and there's an Azerbaijani community in Texas, in Houston particularly, where Azerbaijanis have been involved and have been able to utilize those relations to build good relations with Azerbaijan.
So how the differences in the situation in different states in the United States affect the foreign policy? As for example, you mentioned Azerbaijan. We know the states where they're very active Armenian lobby, and definitely they will have more pro-Armenian position. And we have the official position of President Biden, who is saying that the United States recognize the territorial integrity of Azerbaijan. So how does the differences between the states affect the official foreign policy made by President Biden?
Well, the states don't affect much the foreign policy that President Biden follows, but the individual congressmen or senators do. So if you have, for example, a congressman from California, Congressman Adam Schiff, who tends to be, or Nancy Pelosi, that tends to be very pro-Armenia and ignore the facts of Karabakh, certainly they are going to try to influence the White House, and because they are from the same party in power, they actually are able to push the White House to do certain things. So for example, we saw when Biden was first elected, he made a deal with those Congress people to recognize the genocide of Armenians in Turkey. And despite the fact that for 100 years, America never went down that route or would do that because there was some historical dispute about this and it was never flushed out. There was never any kind of evidentiary hearings or investigation by the United States to make a determination. And certainly it was a third rail in politics of that nobody wanted to touch. When President Biden was elected, that's one of the first things that he did because he was influenced by the state of California and their senators and their congresspeople. So there are certain states, of course, that are more willing to push for pro-Armenia issues than other states, like Massachusetts. There's a large ethnic Armenian community in Rentham, Massachusetts, in California, where they even, I would say, they control the town of Glendale, California. So they have their influence in different states, but they also have influence in other states where they don't have large numbers because they have entered into coalitions with other groups. So they understand the game of politics in America very well. So for example, we see that they're in a coalition with the Hellenic Foundation, which is the Greek lobby. They're in a coalition, Anka that is in a coalition with the Hellenic Foundation. They're in a coalition with In Defense of Christians, and that's a Christian religious freedom group in Washington, D.C. And so they play this game of politics very well. So even where they don't have reach or a population, they utilize other groups to do their bidding. We saw that in the race, the Senate race in Pennsylvania, where Dr. Mehmet Oz was running for United States Senate. They came at him from every angle, and they actually obtained concessions from the opponent, Fetterman. So they actually got Fetterman to agree to many things before he was even elected.
You mentioned at your lecture also that economy plays a very important role in the United States of America. So speaking about the role of the Armenian lobby, how do you think the economy may push the United States to have better relations with the countries in the new geopolitical reality? For example, there are much talks going on in Washington on the role of Azerbaijan in the region of the South Caucasus, new transportation, middle corridor, salt and gas corridor, which is very important from the energy side to the European Union, and United States highly support this initiative. Then, when it comes to economy, do you think that Armenian lobby may again play destructive role?
Well, we see that America's number one foreign policy interest right now is to counter China. China's number one effort to counter America is the Belt and Road Initiative. That Belt and Road Initiative is something that's very important to the United States. And we see also that China and Russia are now coming together in a partnership, and Russia is going to utilize Iran to transport fuel down to India. So there's clearly a partnership created there where Azerbaijan has a role to play, because that energy is going to be transported right down the Caspian, right across from Azerbaijan. So Azerbaijan is geographically located to be a perfect partner for the United States to do these counter-China activities, to counter Russia, to play a part and to see that the Caucasus are the future of control and power in Eurasia. So the Caucasus are going to play a very important role, and Armenia is not going to play a role there because Armenia is a partner to Iran, Armenia is a partner to Russia, and will continue to be because they haven't accepted the conditions for peace. So they are not going to engage in that ability to transport. They're not going to benefit economically from their neighbors. And so America understands this. And I think really that is the number one thing that keeps Armenia from being on America's plate as its ally. Because America sees that Armenia, really, it's very difficult for it to be an ally because it's still in bed with Iran and Russia and will continue to be. But I know that the American ambassador to Armenia is very active in actually lobbying for Armenia and against Azerbaijan. I saw that she went to the border the other day and made some very interesting statements about things that she didn't even witness. So she seems to have her own agenda, which is not necessarily consistent with the White House's position. And I'm very surprised that she went that far out on a line and made those statements. And I'm very surprised that the State Department didn't actually distance themselves from those statements after she made them, where she indicated that Azerbaijan is actually blockading the Lashin corridor, particularly since we know that the International Court just said there was no evidence that Azerbaijan was involved in any kind of blockade.
That's true, because the cars with the humanitarian aid can easily pass through the Lechin Road without any restrictions. And we had many journalists, international journalists, community who arrived to the Lechin Road to see it with their own eyes. But coming back to the relations between Armenia and the United States, you shouldn't forget about the visit of Nancy Pelosi to Armenia, where it was most about the issues related to the internal politics. So does it mean that some politicians, policymakers in the United States, time to time are willing to use Armenia in their own geopolitical purposes, rather than to think about the future of these countries. Because if these people will think about the future of Armenia, they will definitely advise the country to join those global projects which are being proposed and supported by Azerbaijan and other countries in the region.
That's not Nancy Pelosi's concern. Nancy Pelosi's concern is that every 2 years she needs to get reelected. And in order to get reelected every 2 years, Armenian voters in her district will need to vote for her. And the only way that she's going to get those votes is by doing what they expect rather than what the facts suggest.
What do you think, your personal opinion about the situation in the South Caucasus? Antony Blinken, in his statement every time, is saying that we support peace development between Armenia and Azerbaijan, and United States of America, apart from the OSCE Minsk group, which is no longer valid, are trying to be part of the peace processes in the region. But in all, do you think that the peace is possible between Yerevan and Baku in near future? And from your understanding, how exactly United States of America may contribute?
I would love to see America play a constructive role in peace between Azerbaijan and Armenia. However, there is a reality, and that reality is that Armenia is not ready to have peace with Azerbaijan. Armenia still believes that if it continues to be belligerent and make misinformation about what's happening, it can persuade other countries like the US to be on its side, to play the victim, and to prevent from Azerbaijan from using its territory as a sovereign and as it sees fit. The people that live in Stepankart and Khankendi, these are people that are rightfully and correctly Azerbaijani citizens. They are subject to Azerbaijan's laws, and what they are doing is just refusing the law. That is what is happening. They're refusing the law supported by another nation. So they are supported by a foreign government against the law of the government where they reside. This is not really an acceptable situation, and the US is going to have a hard time supporting that. However, the US also has a very difficult time coming down and just accepting the facts as well.
Could you answer me the question, very important for many Azerbaijanis? After the Soviet Union collapsed in the beginning of 19th, on the information arena, we can say that Armenia had a chance to promote its own position in many countries, including the United States. It was quite a difficult time, and our embassy had to have very hard work in that time to destroy the walls of this information blockade. How is the situation now? Do you think that the voice of Azerbaijan is being heard in the United States, especially in Washington? And what else can be done by our embassy, by our diaspora, to make sure that there is no misinformation, misunderstanding amongst Americans on the situation in the South Caucasus?
I think you're going to be surprised with my answer, because it's not so much that people are fooled by Armenia's position. Certainly people that don't know are fooled. But many people in Washington do understand that international law is on Azerbaijan's side. They do understand that Armenia utilized military means to take the territory. They do understand that Armenia ethnically cleansed the area. But there's also an unwillingness to address the situation or to talk about it, because the moment anyone talks about it, there's a bullying effect that occurs from anyone against anyone that says something that the Armenian lobby doesn't like. So people say, well, why should I say anything? There's only a negative, there's only a downside to my saying anything. So my knowing the truth doesn't really help anything. And if I say the truth, it's only going to hurt me. So I'm better off remaining quiet. And I think it's more of an effect of people don't want the headache without any gain or reason to be having that headache. What's their gain from being a friend of Azerbaijan? Azerbaijan doesn't have a big umbrella. It doesn't have a lot of friends. It doesn't have a lot of people in America. It doesn't have a very big embassy. It doesn't have a lot of relations with America. Why go out on a limb and say the right thing when there's nothing to be benefited from it. And I think that's the effect that I see again and again. I go to meetings, I go to hearings, and I hear Armenian, Azerbaijan discussed, and there's nobody there willing to speak up on Azerbaijan's side. Azerbaijan's umbrella is always very small. Even with the think tanks and institutes that I deal with, they privately talk and say, yes, Azerbaijan is in the right, particularly the rule of law type of think tanks that I'm involved in. They understand they're in the right, but they don't want to talk about it. They don't want to hold an event. They don't want to issue a report. They don't want protesters outside their door when nobody from Azerbaijan is going to be there to assist them or to help them with the situation. Azerbaijan hasn't had really a lot of outreach in America. And I think that's really the problem, more so than anything. Azerbaijan's umbrella is small.
We shouldn't forget about ANCA, Armenian National Committee of America, which is quite active in the United States, and sometimes they even can make statements about the territorial claims against Azerbaijan, against Georgia, against Turkey, and it's, let's say, they are doing it while living in the free society of the United States.
Right. They openly make, I would say, racist, bigoted statements, expansionist claims. They claim everything and anything in the area as their own, and nobody bats an eye and says, wait, you're actually proposing belligerence and war against your neighbors. Nobody accuses them of that, again, because there's no benefit from challenging them, or there's nothing to be gained from addressing it, because they know there's Armenians in the neighborhood, but where are the Azerbaijanis? I think I had mentioned this to you the other day. I've been following this issue very closely since my own interest started in 1991. And it wasn't until the 44-day war where I actually met Azerbaijanis that weren't part of the official diplomatic corps in Washington in America. They never reached out. They were invisible. Now I know many of them, but before that they were really, absent.
Really? So it means that Azerbaijan should be even more active on its foreign policy towards the United States. But what's really good is that more and more people in the United States, as I see from the official statements, understand that the peace development in the region of the South Caucasus is in the interest of all countries, and that is very important.
America understands that, and I just want to add one thing to that as well, that America is a good ally for Azerbaijan. It isn't quite as negative as it looks, and regardless of the situation now with China and Russia, America is the only current world superpower. China is certainly a growing power. It has expanded its military tenfold in recent years, but the reality is that China has problems that will affect it in the future, and its growth is at a pinnacle. It is now going to be on the downside. It's achieved what it can achieve. America, though, its opportunities for growth and continued status as a superpower will continue regardless of what China does.
Mr. Rifai, thank you so much for joining IDD Talks today. It was a real pleasure to talk with you about these crucial issues.
Thank you.
Thanks.